biggest mistake you made at your wedding?
Honey, I love you, but said I do. Not my mistake. I love my wife.
On a quiet February morning, a life was taken inside the very home that was supposed to be a sanctuary. A person who once seemed to have everything, family, career, a future, was found brutally murdered. But how does a life like this come to such a violent and sudden end? How does a seemingly loving marriage spiral into something so deadly? Behind the closed doors of what appeared to be a normal family, something dark and dangerous was brewing. What happened in the moments leading up to that fatal day, and what was hiding beneath the surface of a relationship that appeared so ordinary? Was it simply the tragic result of a broken marriage, or was there more lurking in the shadows than anyone could have imagined? For 41-year-old Rebecca, life was about more than just the day-to-day responsibilities of work and parenting. As a dedicated nurse and a loving mother of 3, she spent her days caring for others, both inside and outside her home. To those who knew her, she was strong, compassionate, and full of life. But beneath the surface, behind the closed doors of a seemingly ordinary existence, a different story was unfolding. The town of Quincy, Illinois, had seen its share of tragedies, but nothing quite like this. A brutal crime that would shake the community to its core. A woman was found murdered inside her own home. Shot multiple times, the sheer violence of the act suggested something deeply personal. But who could have done this? And why? As investigators began to unravel the case, the focus turned to Rebecca's personal life. A marriage that, on the outside, once seemed picture-perfect had been quietly crumbling. A pending divorce. Court battles. A storm that had been building long before that February morning. Was this the final, tragic result of a relationship gone wrong? Or was there something even more sinister at play? The case that followed would reveal shocking details. Secret fears, alarming warnings, and a trail of evidence that would lead investigators down a dark and twisted path. As authorities pieced together the truth, they would uncover a series of events that no one saw coming. Hidden resentments. Conflicting narratives. A case that wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. Before we unravel the shocking details of this case, take a moment to support the channel. If you love deep diving into real-life mysteries and true crime stories, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss an episode as we uncover the darkest and most chilling crimes. Rebecca dedicated her life to helping others. As a nurse, she was known for her compassion, her steady hands, and her unwavering commitment to patient care. Her colleagues admired her, her patients trusted her, and her family adored her. But beyond the walls of the hospital, Rebecca's most important role was being a mother. She lived for her 3 children, making sure they felt loved, supported, and safe. To those on the outside, she seemed to balance it all, her career, her family, and the challenges that life inevitably brings. But behind closed doors, things were far more complicated. Years earlier, she had met Timothy, a man who shared her ambitions and, for a time, her dreams of building a future together. They married, built a home, and started a family. But as the years passed, cracks began to form. What had once been a partnership built on love and trust slowly shifted into something unrecognizable. The disagreements became more frequent, the tension more suffocating. And then came the fear, the realization that the person she had once vowed to spend her life with was no longer the man she thought she knew. Their marriage was unraveling, and by 2022, it was beyond repair. The divorce proceedings were drawn out, bitter, and filled with accusations. Court documents would later reveal the growing animosity between them, custody disputes, allegations of controlling behavior, and a sense of unease that seemed to follow Rebecca wherever she went. Friends recalled hushed conversations where she expressed her fears, her growing concern that this battle wouldn't end in the courtroom. That something worse was coming. But even as she fought to reclaim her independence, the reality of domestic conflict loomed over her. Across the country, countless women found themselves in similar situations, trapped in relationships that had become dangerous, bound by legal battles that only heightened the tension. Statistics show that the most dangerous time for a woman in an abusive or toxic relationship isn't during the years of conflict, it's during the separation, when the final ties are being cut. It's the moment when control is slipping away that violence often erupts. Rebecca had taken steps to move on, to protect herself, but had she sensed the danger creeping closer? Had she known that her fight for freedom might come at the ultimate cost? February 23, 2023. A day that should have been like any other. Morning routines, school drop-offs, a shift at the hospital, ordinary moments that, for Rebecca, would never come. Because on that day, inside her home, something unthinkable happened. Something violent. Something final. It started with silence. Messages unanswered. Calls that rang but went to voicemail. Then came the concern. Rebecca was always reliable, always on time, and always there when her children needed her. But that afternoon, she never showed up to pick them up from school. At first, there were excuses, maybe she was caught up in something, maybe she was running late. But as the minutes stretched into hours, unease turned into fear. A family member, sensing that something was wrong, made the decision that would change everything. They went to her home, expecting to find a simple explanation. Maybe she had fallen asleep. Maybe she had lost track of time. But what they found instead was a nightmare. The door was locked. No answer. No sign of movement inside. And then, the decision to go in. What happened next would be seared into their memory forever. Rebecca was there, inside. But she wasn't breathing. She wasn't moving. And in the stillness of that room, the horrifying reality set in. She had been shot. Not once. Not twice. But multiple times. A brutal, calculated act of violence. The call to 911 came quickly. A voice trembling with shock, relaying the impossible. Emergency responders arrived, but there was nothing they could do. Rebecca was gone. As the crime scene tape went up and investigators entered the house, a disturbing picture began to emerge. There was no sign of forced entry, at least, not in the way one might expect from a random break-in. The shooter had known exactly what they were doing. The attack had been precise. Ruthless. Not the work of a stranger in search of valuables, but of someone with a far more personal motive. Bullet casings were scattered across the floor, the chilling remnants of the final moments of Rebecca's life. The forensic team moved carefully, documenting every detail. The position of the body. The trajectory of the bullets. The lingering scent of gunpowder that still clung to the air. But as investigators combed through the scene, questions began to surface. The brutality of the attack suggested rage, deep, personal rage. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was planned. But by whom? And why? In the hours after the discovery, whispers spread through the community. People who had known Rebecca, who had seen the slow unraveling of her marriage, now feared what had once seemed unthinkable. Had this been an act of blind rage? Or was this something far more deliberate? Law enforcement worked quickly, gathering surveillance footage, reviewing text messages, and speaking with those closest to Rebecca. And with each new piece of evidence, a dark and undeniable truth began to take shape. This was no random crime. And soon, investigators would find themselves on the trail of someone they never wanted to suspect. As the crime scene was sealed off and investigators worked to piece together what had happened inside Rebecca's home, one thing was immediately clear: this was no random act of violence. The methodical nature of the attack, the lack of forced entry, and the sheer brutality all pointed to something personal. Someone had wanted Rebecca dead. But who? And why? The Quincy Police Department wasted no time. Detectives began their work with the basics, examining security footage, speaking to neighbors, and tracing Rebecca's last known movements. Every detail mattered. Had she been followed? Had someone been watching her? What clues could be found in the hours leading up to her murder? Almost immediately, attention turned toward those closest to Rebecca. Statistically, when a woman is murdered in her home, the perpetrator is often someone she knew. And in this case, one name stood out above all others: her estranged husband, Timothy. Timothy and Rebecca were in the middle of a contentious divorce, a battle that had dragged on for months. Custody disputes, legal filings, arguments over finances, the tension between them had only escalated in the weeks before her death. And then, there were Rebecca's own fears. Friends and family later recalled that she had expressed concerns about her safety. Had those fears been justified? Police knew they needed more than speculation. They needed evidence. And when they turned their attention to Timothy, what they found was disturbing. A digital trail began to emerge, one that told a story far more chilling than anyone had imagined. A forensic analysis of Timothy's devices uncovered a series of Google searches that sent a shiver down investigators' spines. Searches about how to commit murder. How to break into a home. The best ways to kill someone without getting caught. Each query painted a darker picture, a mind preoccupied with something sinister. Then came the physical evidence. The police obtained a search warrant for Timothy's home. Inside, they found firearms and ammunition that forensic analysts would later determine matched the casings found at the crime scene. A further search of his vehicle turned up even more damning clues. A crowbar. Dark clothing. Signs that someone had been preparing for something methodical, something planned. But even with this evidence, the case was not without its challenges. Timothy, when questioned, denied any involvement. He portrayed himself as a concerned father, someone grieving the loss of his children's mother. His defense would later claim that much of the so-called evidence was circumstantial, search history that could be explained and items that could belong to anyone. And then, there was the court of public opinion. As the case unfolded, something unexpected resurfaced, something from Timothy's past that cast a long and eerie shadow over the investigation. Years earlier, Timothy had appeared on the game show Family Feud. It was supposed to be a light-hearted moment, a chance for fun. But during his episode, he was asked a simple question: "What's the biggest mistake you made at your wedding?" His response? Chilling in hindsight. "I'm going to say, I do." The audience laughed. The host chuckled. But now, in the wake of Rebecca's murder, that clip took on a much darker meaning. Had it been a joke? Or had it been a glimpse into something far more sinister? As media outlets picked up the story, the case became a spectacle. True crime enthusiasts dissected every piece of information. Legal analysts debated whether the evidence was enough. And all the while, one question loomed over everything: had Rebecca's fate been sealed long before that fateful day? But for investigators, there was no time for speculation. They needed to build a rock-solid case. They needed to prove beyond a doubt what they were beginning to suspect, that Rebecca's murder had not been an impulsive act but the result of careful, deliberate planning. And soon, the final pieces of the puzzle would begin to fall into place. The courtroom was silent as the trial began, silent except for the steady clicks of cameras and the hushed murmurs of those who had come to witness justice unfold. The murder of Rebecca had shaken the community, but now, in this room, the focus shifted to the one person who stood accused of taking her life. Timothy Bliefnick. The prosecution wasted no time in laying out their case. They painted a picture of a man consumed by control, a man who had watched his marriage collapse and had refused to let go. Rebecca had been trying to move on, fighting for her independence, but Timothy had seen it as something else, an attack, a loss of power. And, they argued, that loss had driven him to plan the unthinkable. Piece by piece, the evidence was laid out before the jury. The chilling internet searches, how to kill someone and get away with it. The research into home invasions. The crowbar. The matching ammunition. The surveillance footage shows Timothy's vehicle in the area near Rebecca's home the night before the murder. Each detail built upon the last, forming a chain of damning evidence. But the prosecution had more than just forensic proof. They had words, Rebecca's own. Messages she had sent to friends, voicing her fears. Statements she had made, warning that if anything happened to her, people should know where to look. Those words, spoken long before that fateful day, now echoed through the courtroom with haunting clarity. The defense, however, fought back. They argued that the case was built on circumstantial evidence, that while Timothy's actions may have seemed suspicious, they did not directly prove he had pulled the trigger. They claimed the internet searches were nothing more than morbid curiosity, taken out of context. That the presence of firearms did not automatically make him a murderer. That his past statements, including his infamous Family Feud remark, were jokes twisted into something far more sinister than they had ever been meant to be. But there was one thing the defense could not explain away: the motive. The bitterness of the divorce, the custody battle, and the financial disputes. The rage that had simmered beneath the surface for years. The jury listened, their expressions unreadable, as the prosecution delivered its final argument: this was not a random act. This was premeditated. This was murder. And then, after weeks of testimony, cross-examinations, and emotional witness statements, it was time for the jury to decide. Deliberations lasted only a few hours. And when the verdict was read, the courtroom held its breath. He was found guilty of first-degree murder. Home invasion. The weight of those words settled over the room. Timothy showed no visible reaction as the decision was announced, but for Rebecca's loved ones, it was a moment of both relief and sorrow. Justice had been served, but it could never bring her back. The sentencing was swift. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. A final, decisive judgment that ensured he would never again walk free. Outside the courtroom, the world reacted. The case had captured national attention, drawing discussions about domestic violence, the warning signs that so often go ignored, and the tragic reality that, for many, leaving is the most dangerous time. News outlets dissected every moment of the trial. True crime enthusiasts debated the evidence. Advocates used Rebecca's story as a painful but necessary reminder of a systemic issue, one that affects countless women across the country. But for those who knew Rebecca, the headlines and discussions meant little. They had lost a daughter, a sister, a mother. The trial had ended, but the grief remained. Yet, in the midst of that grief, there was also resolve. A vow that Rebecca's story would not be forgotten. That her life would not simply be defined by its tragic end, but by the love she had given, the people she had touched, and the hope that, in telling her story, others might be saved from the same fate. Because in the end, justice is not just a verdict. It is a lesson. A warning. And a promise that what happened to Rebecca should never happen again. A home should be a place of safety. A marriage, a promise of love. But in the case of Rebecca Bliefnick, both became something else entirely, something dark, something dangerous. And for many, the most haunting part of this story isn't just what happened to Rebecca. It's the unsettling realization that it could happen to anyone. In the aftermath of Rebecca's murder, a painful truth emerged: this was not an isolated tragedy. Across the country, countless individuals find themselves trapped in cycles of control and fear, their cries for help often overlooked or dismissed. Experts on domestic violence have long warned that the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is when the victim tries to leave. And Rebecca was in the process of doing just that. Had the warning signs been there all along? Friends and family later recalled her growing fears, her quiet but urgent attempts to set up security measures. She had confided in loved ones that she was afraid. She had even spoken words that would later seem prophetic, telling those close to her that if anything happened, people should know where to look. And yet, even with those warnings, the unimaginable still happened. So, what does this case teach us? What could have been done differently? One of the lingering questions in this case is whether more could have been done to intervene. Rebecca had been engaged in a lengthy and contentious legal battle with Timothy. The court system had seen the disputes, the custody disagreements, and the financial struggles. But did it see the danger? Did it recognize that what was unfolding was not just a bitter divorce but a situation that could, and ultimately did, turn deadly? The role of the legal system in cases of domestic violence has long been debated. Protective orders, restraining orders, on paper, they offer some level of security. But in reality, do they always provide real protection? In too many cases, these measures come too late or fail to deter those intent on harm. Then, there are the digital footprints, the ones Timothy left behind. His Google searches, his research into home invasions, and his chilling inquiries about how to commit the perfect crime. Could these have been caught sooner? Should there be more oversight, more mechanisms in place to detect when someone is planning something sinister? And what about the psychological aspect? In hindsight, Timothy's behavior on Family Feud, his joking remark about regretting his marriage, feels laced with eerie foreshadowing. But was it just that? A joke? Or was it an unintentional glimpse into a deeper, more dangerous mindset? The intersection of emotional manipulation, entitlement, and control is a terrifying one, and too often, it escalates to violence before anyone realizes just how serious the situation has become. Rebecca's murder forces us to confront difficult truths about domestic violence, about the systems in place to protect victims, and about how society responds to cases like these. Too often, the signs are there, but they are brushed aside. Too often, victims feel unheard until it is too late. But perhaps the most unsettling question remains: how many more are out there? How many people, right now, are living in fear, their lives controlled by someone they once loved? And what will it take for their stories to end differently? Rebecca's story does not have a happy ending. But in telling it, in examining every moment, every warning sign, every failure of the system, there is hope that her legacy can serve as a lesson. That the next Rebecca might be heard in time. That the next warning signs will not go ignored. Because justice is more than a conviction. It is prevention. It is awareness. It is making sure that what happened in Quincy, Illinois, never happens again. Domestic violence is a silent epidemic, affecting countless lives every day. If Rebecca's story has taught us anything, it's that speaking up, seeking help, and recognizing red flags can mean the difference between life and death. If you or someone you know is in danger, don't wait, reach out, seek support, and remember that no one should have to face this alone. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe justice was served? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this story compelling, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Next time, we're diving into another shocking case, one filled with deception, betrayal, and an ending no one saw coming. Stay tuned, and as always, stay safe.